So yeah, so I got something fun to show you guys, and before we start the show here, this came. My first instinct was of how excited I was. Look, these are Stratomatic cards.
Woo,
Yeah,
baby!
the official. Now I was really fired up until I looked and saw Ilya Kovalchuk on the top, and the Atlanta with his Atlanta Thrashers card, realizing that these cards are not the right year.
What's that, 2011?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
These are the
wow.
20. These are the 2008 and 9
Oh,
statistics.
two,
I'm
oh,
like that's not just a mistake. Like the new cards aren't out yet. So I called Stratomac. I'm like, oh, really sorry. You know how that happened. So the new cards don't come out till the end of the
it's the end
month,
of August, early September, yeah.
September 30th actually. They come
Yeah.
out later now than they used to.
Yeah,
It's
I know
still
that
fun to go through here, but I
the
was
league the league that I'm in, I'm still in a Stratomatic league because I'm, a hockey fanatic.
Mhm.
Doesn't draft until September or early October, so
Yeah,
and I've been after the commissioner in that league for the last 5 years to contract from 16 teams to 12 teams so I can improve the all-star quality of my team.
there you go. Yeah, I mean that's to me like so. There are some funny like the Ilya Brizgalov and the Phoenix Coyotes.
It was one of the best cards, probably.
Yeah, it's a pretty good card. Let's check it out here. Let's see what we have here. So I'm going to start tearing these apart now because we got to see what this is about here. All right, so let's say Ilya Brizgalov as a Phoenix Coyote. This was the 2008-9 season, so this is the year before he was a Flyer. All right, so there we go. Let's look at it there. All right, so let's see if I can get this in focus here. Just
So
about
he's
right about
6,
yeah.
8, and 11 goal 1 to 18.
Yeah,
That's
it's a pretty good card.
it's not a bad card. His in Stratomatic his save percentage is it's 906. So that's
Right.
pretty much an average card.
Yeah, so it's not terrible. It's not
Yeah.
terrible. But yeah, there's some. Let's see. Who do we want to see here? I mean, you played this year through, obviously. So
Yeah. But yes, and normally I get the cards, but we use the cards only for like drafting, and then we play the computer game.
I
So
gotcha. So you don't see the card. You don't see the cards when you play the computer
no,
games.
no, no, no. You get the like you can order the cards. You can order
Mhm.
the cards and the computer game, or you can order just the computer game. I usually get both. Use the cards when I'm evaluating to draft because sometimes you're drafting prospects and sometimes you're drafting guys who just have good cards.
I gotcha.
And then after you've drafted, if you're playing the computer game, you really don't need to see the cards anymore. You know the quality of the players. You just set your lines and go about it.
Oh, I don't know if I'd like that as much. I'm thinking about it. Like I think you have to like to me like is looking at like here's Sidney Crosby, right? So let's see if I can get this focus in a little bit.
Sidney Crosby is a 3 on defense with a very nice shot.
Yeah.
And here's the biggest funniest thing. If you look at the top left-hand corner of the card, it says I meaning intimidation. His intimidation is 1 to 7. Now that's out of a scale of 15. So that means that
He's a
Sidney
pretty intimidating
Crosby
player. Well, actually, he's a C. He's a B penalty.
B penalty, but a 1 to 7 intimidation. I would quibble with the fact that Sidney Crosby would be in the middle of the road of players who intimidate, and because
Yeah.
I associate intimidation with toughness and being mean, and he's not tough. I mean, he's tough in the sense of being durable, but he's not a tough player, a dirty player, and a mean player.
Right. No, he's not. But I guess intimidation. I never got how they did it quite exactly. Like intimidation was always a weird thing to me.
It was always based on penalties. I mean, a guy like penalty minutes. A guy like Boreas Salming always had high intimidation, which wasn't completely inaccurate because later in his career, Boreas Salming was a surgeon with his stick. He would use
Right.
that to keep players away from him. So he always got a high intimidation because players would be fearful of his stick. But
Right. Yeah.
anyway,
No, I agree. I mean, yeah. To me, yeah. I remember like Dale Hunter's intimidations back in the day, like 1 to 15. Remember 1 to 15 intimidation?
yes. Dale Hunter was always a double A penalty.
Wow.
Double A.
I remember double A 1 to 15.
1 to 15, yeah. 7 through 11 was a penalty on the opponent defense, so that's how you always got it.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, so Ryan, are you on Google Plus? Because we could bring you. Josh is not gonna be able to do it today. Do you want to jump in? I don't know where Ryan Garner is right now, but
He's in Jamaica, man.
yeah, I know he's in Jamaica. But do you have like a laptop with a video screen on it or anything like that down there? Because if you want to jump in, I can invite you in here and.
He was. Well, I mean, we can.
Otherwise, we won't. But I'm just saying.
Yeah.
If you're not, we'll have you on at some point. Waiting. Yeah. Oh, we're going to talk about Carcillo today. Definitely.
We need this sound effect for Ryan Garner.
Yeah. About right. But it works on all that kinds of levels. It's like we're waiting for him. He's a ticking time bomb. Just kidding. No, Ryan's not boring by any stretch of the imagination. If not, we'll have you on next week, Ryan. No
yeah, we'll have you on next week, Ryan. He says I have no idea if he's on Google Plus, so that would be a little bit of a hindrance.
Yeah, we're not gonna worry about that now. Okay, so we'll worry about that later. All right, so let's get the show going here.
It is Friday, September the 5th.
Fantastic. That it is. Here we go. Wait, let me put this on. Sorry. My bad. There we go. Ay.
And we can take questions in the chat later in the show if anybody's interested. So you ask your questions later on, and we'll try to answer them.
Okay, you got it. Hello, Hockey World. It is Friday, September 5th, 2014.
I'm Michael Lagello.
And I'm lost. I'm Eklund, and you're watching the HockeybuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com. The reason we're talking about 2012 is we were actually going through some old Stratomatic cards here and before the show. So yeah, I got the package. I ordered from Stratomatic, all excited. The box came, and I got all these cards. I'm like, this is going to be awesome. And I look on the first one, and the very top card is Ilya Kovalchuk, Atlanta Thrashers. I'm like, okay, that's the wrong year. Anyway.
I didn't know Stratomatic had SKA St. Petersburg cards. There you go.
Yeah. Apparently, there's a lot of interesting players in there, but okay, that's not the right season. Hold on 1 second. I might invite Ryan while we're going. All right. So Mike, we had a couple invites to talk about today.
Yeah.
So let's do it.
Well, Ville Laino, former Buffalo Sabre, former Philadelphia Flyer, and Detroit Red Wing, received a invitation from the Boston Bruins, which I chuckled a little bit when I heard about it because the idea of the big bad Bruins bringing in Ville Laino, who is sort of what I refer to as a China doll, somebody who's very fragile, who's been injured every year for the Sabres that he was here, which was 3 years, was a little funny. But when it comes to right now they've invited him, and I believe they still it was confirmed that they invited Simone Gagne.
Yes.
They're looking for a veteran guy that they can add, somebody with some skill. Somebody they can add for maybe $550,000 or $600,000 on a one-way deal, because they don't have a lot of cap room. Now they did sign another kid, Matt Fraser, who they used a little bit at the end of the season, and in the playoffs they still have Torrey Krug and they still have Riley Smith unsigned. So they're still in the process of getting things lined up. The other free agent invitee was former Ranger, Flyer, King, and Hawk, Daniel Carcillo,
yes.
Invited by the Pittsburgh Penguins. And the prospect of Carcillo and Steve Downey being on the Penguins just makes my hands rub together with the possibility of them playing the Flyers and the.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, yeah, we're talking about a lot of. By the way, Gagne, Carcillo, Leno, Downey, these are all ex-Flyers that we're talking about. So it's an ex-Flyer invite day, sort of. Well, I mean, Downey's actually signed a deal. But my
Right.
question, with Downey, the weird thing about Downey is, like I've said before, watching him last year, I was not convinced at all he was healthy enough to play, and I'm really, I really felt like if ever you saw a guy who was like kind of the definition of a guy who's rushed back from concussion,
Mm-hmm.
it felt like Downey to me. It was
Well,
so
it,
blatant.
it's funny like how things turned so badly for Downey over the course of a couple years because he looked like he really was going to be an impactful player when he was playing with Tampa.
Yeah.
He seemed to find his niche there, and he looked like he could really succeed. And then he got moved to Colorado, and I didn't really see the fit there. It didn't
I
work
think
as
pretty
well.
good in Colorado. I mean, he was pretty good last year at the beginning of the year in Colorado. He's a talented kid. I mean, there's no two ways about it. But health wise, there's serious questions there. Like health wise, I don't see it.
Yeah, and he can't, well, the thing he can't do anymore is fire himself around like a human projectile like he used to do in his younger days. I
Yeah.
remember that hit in,
Oh
I
yeah.
think it was Dean McCammond, where it was like a
Yeah.
flying body block. He can't do that anymore. But I think part of his game is the physical, getting involved physically. And if he can't do that anymore with a propensity to take concussions, then his career, he's going to have to seriously alter the way he plays, and then he might not be as effective a player as he used to be.
Right, and that's his game, right? 100% his game. So I'm with you. I think Carcillo is more of an insurance policy against this with Downey. I don't see both of them being on this team. But what Carcillo brings to the table is he is a flyer killer.
Yeah.
Some would argue even when he was on the team. But yeah, he definitely is a flyer killer. And with the Rangers last year, it's hard to forget if you're Flyers fans, but you might not remember as just a general hockey fan that he played a big part in that best of 7 series to get the
Yeah.
Rangers past the Flyers, and that's a big thing. So, and I honestly felt, Carcillo was suspended in the playoffs last year. We all remember that. But I felt like that he should have been brought back in the Kings series more than he was, because I really, he's a gamer, and he has some skill, and he frustrates other teams. He gets other teams off their game. He's very, very good at that, and especially some of the Flyers players who don't, former Flyers on the Kings who weren't his biggest fans. With Carter and Richards, I thought that would have been a great idea for the Rangers to pull that chip out, but they never did. So, I mean, Steve Downey, yeah, Victor says in the chat room is better, and he's definitely better than, I think he's better than Carcillo, but that's if he's healthy, and that's a huge, huge if, right now.
Right, and there was a genuine effort by Jim Rutherford to improve the bottom six of the Penguins, because I mean that's one of the criticisms of the Pens is the fact that it was Crosby and Malkin and the guys on their line, and really nothing else, and they really had to improve the diversification of their offense. Now they bring in Hornquist, they bring in guys like Spalling, Marcel Gotch was there from a previous trade. They bring in Blake Como. So they have a few players who I think can play a little more of a prominent role in a bottom six role and not completely depend on Malkin and Crosby to carry the offense. Now the thing is that they're not going to have James Neal this year. They replace him with Hornquist. And they do get Pascal Dupuis back, so it's a question of whether they're going to have enough secondary offense. But not to say that Daniel Carcillo helps in that pursuit, but they need to diversify their forwards and get.
Well,
more.
Jokinen is a big loss to them. I mean, he was a big player for them. I mean, to me, that's the guy that people keep not mentioning with the Florida Panthers. Like he's a good player. He's a big signing. And he was a good playoff performer for the Penguins. And there were times when everybody else in the Penguins sort of got lost. Jokinen didn't. He was good at keeping his focus through a lot of that. So yeah, I think that they need that toughness. There are I have heard Ryan Malone has a really good possibility, and Rossi asked that in the chat room. That I still think Ryan Malone could get an invite from the Penguins. I think that what's happening now, again, like we've heard before, is players are, a good example is Ville Laino, who today, the Bruins came out and said that they offered an invite to, but it wasn't quite like what Carcillo, where he signed a tryout thing. It was more he's been offered an invite. So, talking to people near the situation, it's still possible that Laino signs a deal before he even shows up in Boston there. So that's always possible. Ryan Garner might be joining us here.
Wow.
You have to make your camera. You have to make your camera work, Ryan. You just have to So yeah, we'll see. All right. So Rossi asks, well, my question is, why sign Carcillo when they finally rid themselves of Neal's stupid penalties? Yeah. I mean, it's not that Carcillo will take stupid penalties, but he will also make the other team take stupid penalties. I think that's the difference between Carcillo and Neal. Carcillo is way more apt to not, he's not going to change the game with his sticks too often or with his goal scoring. He will score goals though. He will score weirdly odd goals.
He's a professional disturber, and there's always room in this league for a guy on the bottom six who's a professional disturber. I mean, it just, they draw penalties, they change momentum. Teams need players like that. Now, is Carcillo highly skilled? No. Is he going to score 20 goals? No. But, on a given night, he could change things. Oh my God, it's Ryan Garner.
Holy cow.
Oh my goodness, does this work?
Yes.
It does.
We're seeing you.
Hello, hello. Greetings from Jamaica.
It's good to see you, bud.
Hey, good to see you guys.
Thanks for jumping on all of a sudden like this.
Wow.
This is a good old Hockey Buzz live reunion now.
Yes.
Or Shark Buzz. It's like let's start complaining about the Sharks. Joe Thornton sucks. Patrick Marleau sucks. There you go. Old home week.
The narrative remains the same, Mike.
If not even worse.
Deja vu from 2007, right? With stripping the cap.
Isn't that the case? Is that always the case right here? I just dropped all of my computers. Sorry. Yeah. No. I mean, this is a team that's like, I know. We'll
Fire Ron Wilson.
We'll talk about the Sharks. I'm going to bring up the Sharks, but thanks. So Ryan, you're in Jamaica now.
I am. My fiance is from Jamaica. She's a school teacher, and so we kind of in the last year kind of hit it off. And
wow.
He says, well, I'm planted here in Jamaica. I'm not going anywhere. And so me being kind of fun and fancy free, I was living in San Francisco and decided, well, move to Florida, get a little closer, and then I made the move to Jamaica here about a month ago. So
nice.
This is home.
He's going to be a rum distributor and send ganja through the mail. Thank you.
I can hook you up, Mike.
There you go. Thank you, sir.
Probably was easier to get in California. But anyway. Yeah, so there.
And this will be my only chance to make an Olympic hockey team if I can somehow crack the Jamaican team.
That's the truth, isn't it? Come on now.
Because I'm not a great skater at all.
That's all right. I bet a lot of people down there aren't great skaters, and I think you got.
Is John Candy the GM of that team?
There are a few John Candy types running around, actually. So it's.
Wow. So what part of Jamaica are you in? Because I have people down there too.
I am in a place called Old Harbor, which is not the sexy, attractive, posh area of the island. It's just west of Kingston.
Okay.
And, kind of out in the country a little bit, a few miles from the ocean, not necessarily the beach, because there aren't many beaches on the southern end of the island. But
gotcha.
Oh, it's a good spot to be. Not bad. I mean, I don't have to shovel the driveway this winter, so.
As an Edmonton kid, this is pretty crazy. That's a long way from Edmonton, my friend.
Pretty wild, absolutely. But
but there's other kinds of snow in Jamaica.
Yeah. All right, so let's get to the show a little bit more. But jeez, I'm so thrown now because we got Ryan. That's pretty awesome.
God forbid it was just me.
I know, God, thank you so much. Thought we had to talk, and I know you're not a former ice girl, Ryan, so that's okay.
I'm not. I auditioned, but didn't make the cut.
Good.
You didn't have the legs for it.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. All right, Mike. All right, so I'm going to start with the one right in your wheelhouse from my wild predictions because I want to go there. We're going to continue. We did some of the wild predictions yesterday. Go to the end of the show so you can see them. But here, my 13th wacky prediction for 2014-15 is that the Edmonton and Calgary will be in a tight battle until the end, but only one will have a shot at the playoffs. That's my pick. That I actually think Calgary has as good a shot as Edmonton has at the playoffs.
I'll just say a tight battle for the Connor McDavid sweepstakes.
Nope. No,
anyway.
I don't think either of these people will be in the Connor McDavid sweepstakes. I've already said that, but I think that they're both. I mean, like we said, it's so friggin' hard to make the playoffs in the West. So they're going to be battling, like a team like the Minnesota Wild or something like that to get in.
Exactly. That's the biggest thing in the West is who are you going to leapfrog to make the playoffs? We know none of those California teams, obviously not St. Louis or Colorado. And so by the time you get into the Dallases and the Nashvilles and teams like that, even Vancouver, I think, will still be better than Edmonton and Calgary. It's a tough battle. I mean, that's just the reality. Maybe if we were in the Eastern Conference, maybe if we'd lobbied a little harder like the Red Wings did, we might have a shot at the postseason. But
much harder still, though, because you are way further out west than
that is very true.
Than the Red Wings.
The NHL offices are sick of Little Caesars pizza.
Yeah. No, but I saw you in the chat room before. You do think Edmonton's going to be better than Calgary this year?
I think Edmonton will be marginally better than Calgary. The thing where people get hung up on Calgary is the heart and the grit and the competitiveness, and apparently that's all comes from their coach, I suppose. I don't know where that comes from, but because people say, well, they were in every game last season, and that wasn't necessarily the case. It's just they would knock off the Colorados or the San Jose's every now and then, and so people would turn around and say, wow, that Calgary team is pretty good, although they would kind of ignore it when they lost by 3 goals to Nashville. So, I mean, Calgary was not a good team last year, but they kind of got a little PR on their side, I think mostly because people love hating Edmonton. People back from the 80s love hating Edmonton, and they love the fact now that the Oilers have stunk for a decade and gathered up all these draft picks, and the draft picks have not worked, right?
Yeah, right. I'm with you on that one. I think. All right, so I'll go with that. And I'll feed into your conspiracy theory a little bit more here because I think those of us on the East, when we got to see Calgary play, when they were just part of the package, they played well. I think that plays into this. Like I think that and there's a lot of writers obviously in the East, so I think there's an East Coast bias to the Calgary Flames if that's possible because they would not naturally the doubleheader game wouldn't be Calgary and Nashville, right? We would see Calgary play Pittsburgh, or we'd see Calgary play somebody like that, and that game would be on. So I think that definitely feeds into it for sure.
Sure.
But yeah, I'll go with that. Mike, how do you think of this play between my prediction there? I know it's not too crazy, but I just think that both actually have a shot at the playoffs. I'm going to disagree with one thing you said, Ryan. I am not convinced San Jose is a playoff team. I'm just going to throw that out there right now. And I'm a huge Sharks fan, and I think they've got a great team, but I just think they are doing everything they can to forcibly somehow screw it up, like on their own. And it's amazing to me because there are 25 teams in the NHL that would trade their rosters right now with the San Jose Sharks, but still, they've done it. I'm wondering the kind of thing that if the Sharks have been known to sometimes either go very hot or very cold from the beginning of the year. If this team goes cold at the beginning of the year, I think that's it. I think that I could see massive hysteria among them. Like that. I just don't think they're not a solid. Emotionally sound group right now. That's my 2 cents.
They have a fragile psyche, is what you're saying. And I think everybody realizes that. No. Let me just ask. I just want to ask Ryan rhetorically whether he can afford the increased postage of running the Dallas Eakins fan club in Jamaica. Now, I'll say this. I honestly do not think that Calgary is a playoff team. I think they're taking strides in that direction. They have a couple really good young defensemen in Brody. Giordano is a really solid defenseman. Monahan was a very good addition last year as a first-round pick. I don't know whether Bennett's going to make the team this year. They added Jonas Hiller, so I think that will probably prevent them from being a team that will be in realistic running for the McDavid, Eichel, draft choice. Edmonton, you look at that roster and you should say there's no way that they're going to be even close to 30th overall. But invariably, they always end up there.
No.
Ryan, where I'm questioning is, and I said this before, I don't understand the free agent signings. Fane, I don't think is that great of a defenseman. I didn't think that they overpaid the defenseman from Columbus, who's I'm drawing a blank on. Yeah, Nikitin. So I mean, I don't know how much they've really improved on the back end, and that's really where they needed to improve.
I totally agree, Mike. I totally agree. First thing, I think Calgary is going to be better than they were last year. I think the addition of Hiller is huge just to solidify their goaltending, which was an issue at times last season. I think Monahan's going to be better. And I also think bringing in Devin Setaguchi is going to be good for that team and for the player, because I think we're going to see a little resurgence from him after bouncing around for a few years. He's an actual player. We saw it in San Jose, and I think he's ending up in a good spot close to home there in Calgary. So I think Calgary's going to be
Mason Raymond. And Mason Raymond too.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And as for Edmonton, there isn't anything to say that they are going to be better than last season based on the additions that they made. I mean, Nikita Nikitin was a healthy scratch in the playoffs for the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Right.
And that is currently the Oilers' biggest free agent acquisition, their highest paid defenseman, and this is not a guy who's proven anything, right? And now you're paying him $4.5 million a year to basically lead a group of who knows what we have in the Edmonton blue line, right? And then same thing with Benoit Pouliot and Teddy Purcell coming into Edmonton and Sam Gagner being shown the door. These guys are not proven. These guys have either failed different places or they've been just kind of mediocre, shrug your shoulders, that's just a player, running around, not really making an impact on the game. And so there isn't anything to say that the Oilers are going to be better than they were last season. I mean, you assume that guys take strides from one year to the next, although who knows, right? The only thing with the Oilers is Ben Scrivens being able to be there from the start of training camps, hopefully solidify the goaltending after last year going through so many different starting goaltenders. Hopefully he's the guy that can make a difference, but again, we'll see. Everything's kind of unproven. So while the Oilers, I don't think anyone's penciling them in to make the playoffs. I think they should be marginally better than last season, right?
And I'm a fan of Ben Scrivens. He's a good kid, really good head on his shoulders, and played well in Los Angeles. And then when he went to Edmonton played well last year at the end of the season. So I think he's up to it. Him and Fast should give them at least decent goaltending. But the defense and getting production from anybody other than guys named Hall, Eberle, and maybe Yakupov and Nugent Hopkins, that's going to be their.
Yeah, but I think people are underestimating just how good Taylor Hall is going to be. I mean, we saw the beginnings of it last year, and I think it's impossible for a team with Taylor Hall to be terrible. I just think he really feels to me like he's stepping into that, mini.
I'll take Taylor Hall right now, Ak.
He's amazing. He's an amazing player, and I think we're only starting to see the beginnings of that. I think of what he can do, and I think that's what's exciting to me. All right, next up on my list here, the Capitals will take one step back to take two steps forward. This season could see them miss the playoffs, but set them up as a force for years to come, a much more stable force. And this is something that the Capitals have never been willing to do. The Capitals have been on the edge for a while, so therefore they always feel that they have to be, a contender. And I think being the Southeast Division actually messed them up for a while because of that. Because they were in such a weak division that they could make the playoffs, so they would make the playoffs. So they had to keep going. I think the Capitals need to step back from the whole thing, and Schwartz is that kind of coach that he will do that. So that's why I think there's a lot of people who are kind of bullish or bearish on the Caps. I'm not really ready to think that. I don't think that they're a playoff team, Mike. Your thoughts?
I think they've definitely taken a step back roster-wise from last year. If you think about it, 2 years ago they had Mike Ribeiro as their number 2 center, and he worked very well. They let him go to Phoenix as a free agent. They bring in Mikhail Grabowski, my favorite guy. He had an up and down year. Now their number 2 center, who is it? Is it, are they going to put Kuznetsov up the middle? Are they going to move Johansson up the middle? Is it going to be Brooks Lake? They really don't have a number 2 center, so all the weight offensively is on the Backstroms and the Ovechkins. And now you've got Barry Trotz, who, I'm just wondering whether there's going to be this kind of Radulov dynamic with Ovechkin. I mean, if that happens, then it's going to be completely crazy in Washington.
Well, that'll be fun if that happens, but
oh yeah, it'd be fun.
I don't think that's gonna. I think Niskanen and Orpik, though. I think and Orpik signing is ridiculous, but for this particular year, it's a good signing. You just can't look at it like a 5-year signing, but for this year, this is something that team needed.
But the thing is like they brought in Halak at the end of the year. Now they're going back to Holtby, who had a really inconsistent year last year. Justin Peters is their backup goaltender. They've reinforced the defense. I don't know if this team really fits Barry Trotz. I think it's a work in progress, and I think that prediction is pretty on. They may miss the playoffs this year. They may take a step back. And maybe when they do, they realize that they have to have get their team fitting their coach's style a little more to have some success.
And they still have a ton of talent. That's the thing. They do have a ton of talent. What are your thoughts on the Caps, Ryan?
I think the Caps don't progress until everyone stops blaming Alexander Ovechkin for everything. I mean, this guy has carried this team on his back for nearly a decade now, and he takes more crap than I think any NHLer ever has. Ever. Yeah. I mean, even when Russia fails in the Olympics, comes back, and the narrative in Washington is this guy's a bum, this guy doesn't care about his teammates. He's the only scoring option, like proven scoring option on the wings they've had in how many years, right? Since you can't even count.
No, I mean, he's an amazing player. You're right, and the plus minus last year was overblown for sure. I mean, because of how many minutes he played. I'm agreeing with you on that. I think 100%. I mean, if Ovechkin was some kid who had grown up in Saskatchewan and had played for the Canadian junior team and been a star, like say a Rick Nash, he wouldn't have taken nearly the heat he's taken. I firmly believe that.
And I think Washington, they definitely, like you said, solidified the back end a little bit. I'm with Mike where I don't understand the Holtby situation because I'm a big fan of Halak. You look at the numbers and you look at the way he's able to stabilize things on the back end. He's a huge help to any team's penalty kill. His save percentage has been amazing no matter where he's been. It's just a matter of getting the starts and getting the chance to show that he can do it over the long haul. So I don't understand that. I see them being a borderline playoff team with those defensemen, those overpaid defensemen. But again, I think a lot of it comes down to see what Barry Trotz can do, how much he can mold that team, right? Not so much the roster, but kind of the mindset and the attitude there.
They have to start off well. I think that the big thing this year in the Metro Division and the Central Division, to me, the two most contested divisions are the Metro and the Central. And if a team gets out, like the Flyers got out last year to like a 1-7 start, you're screwed. But if you actually can get out in a way, like you can actually get going for a bit there, then you have it's a whole different ball of wax, So I think that if the Caps get out strong, we'll have something. If not, then then it's a different ball game in my mind. My next prediction is we talked a little bit about this the other day, but I really kind of thought more about it and was still kind of disgusted by it. Nashville is the longest odds to win the Stanley Cup at 75-1. Now you guys know I'm a Nashville fan for sure, so I'm not. I do recluse. Recluse. That's not the right word to use. I do. Yeah. Anyway, I'm a Nashville fan, but if you're a betting person, remember they finished 3 points out of the playoffs last year without Pekka Rinne, and they have Shea Weber, they have Seth Jones now, and they've added more offense. We talked about Neil, and Jokinen. Peter, I'm not a huge Jokinen fan, but he's still for the Predators. Jokinen is a skilled forward that they haven't had many skilled forwards like Jokinen. And Peter Laviolette, who has a great track record in his first year on teams and has the ability to make very sudden and dramatic impacts. So if you're a betting person, now I know Nashville's the longest odds at 75-1 because they're Nashville and probably a lot of people aren't betting hockey in Nashville, right? But man, that's not a bad bet. And I think Nashville's got a shot at the playoffs. I've never, I can't remember a year when the longest odd Stanley Cup team was this. Like, this is a team that has longer odds than the Buffalo Sabres to win the Stanley Cup. So let's just throw this all in perspective,
Which is insane. Insane.
So, I mean, so perspective is that, so let's just say, if you're a betting person, this might be the best bet on the list. But Mike?
okay, if it's a bet to make the playoffs, I agree with your premise. If it's a bet to win the Stanley Cup, I mean, first they got to get to the playoffs in the West, and I think that they could make the playoffs. I think they could be a seventh or eighth, be a wild card.
Let's stop there for a second. Sorry to interrupt you. But let's say this for a second. Okay, if they make the playoffs.
Yeah.
They're the kind of team, and Pekka Rinne's the kind of goalie. I mean, they are the closest matched team to the LA Kings in the West, in my mind. Like, if you look at a team that could take out the Kings, the Preds are matched up pretty well against the Kings. They kind of are built like the Kings in a lot of ways.
Think of it this way. Think of it this way as well. We know what the NHL playoffs are like. If there is any team where you can tell me that team makes the playoffs and they're a 75-1 long shot to win the cup, I'm asking, will they make the playoffs? If you tell me yes, I'm laying that bet down because it's still hockey, right? The favorites don't always win. The favorites rarely win. We've seen 8 seeds go on runs. We've seen 7 seeds take out, 2 seeds. Like, anything can happen. And the Predators, while no one thinks they'll win the Stanley Cup, those kind of odds, I'd definitely put.
It's insane. I mean, think about the Wild last year. Okay, think about the Minnesota Wild and how far they got with Ilya Bryzgalov in goal and a bunch of players kind of beaten up. And then look at the Predators lineup and put them. It's so much about matchups. The playoffs, we've talked about this many times over the years. It's so much about matchups. If the Predators get the right matchups in the playoffs, if say they get San Jose in the first round, they
you just stole my punchline.
The Preds go right through, right? So no, I'm ripping on San Jose today, but that's the case, right? So let me go to my next prediction anyway. Ryan Kesler. Okay, this is a tough one for me because he was so sought after and such a polarizing figure when I would talk to people. Last year at the deadline, there were players that flat out were calling me the day of the trade deadline, tell me we're not getting Ryan Kesler. And I was like, why? We just can't. We don't want to bring him into this room. There was a whole big, and yet, I covered Ryan Kesler in the Olympics and people so he's just a big personality, right? You're throwing him onto a team with other very big personalities in Getzlaf and Perry, and so my prediction is Kesler will either be an all-star and just be incredible, and everybody will be like, wow, that guy's the best, or he'll have almost no impact on Anaheim at all, and people will be like, oh, man, how long is he signed for? Ryan?
My view of it is can he skate?
Yeah.
If he can skate, if he can still skate, if he's beyond his injury issues, I see him being a major contributor to that team and a positive influence because he's a competitive guy. He kind of rode the wave there in Vancouver without complaining, which had to be difficult at times when they refused to bring in adequate wingers, right? When they teamed him up with guys like David Booth, who was a glorified third liner, and he did just yeoman's work. He went to work every day, put the bucket over his head, grabbed the lunch pail and said, hey, let's go, boys. And so I think now he's in a situation, again, like Vancouver used to be 3-4 years ago, where he says, look, we know we can win. We know we have an opportunity. We are on that short list of Stanley Cup contenders. So I think he's going to be a positive influence there. I can see a return to 60, 65 points out of Kesler, working a second power play unit and giving that team some much-needed depth.
That could happen, Mike.
Well, I mean, one of the things I think it benefits Kesler is the fact that Getzlaf will be the number 1 center. It's not like he has Sedin as the number 1 center in Vancouver, where I think teams could maybe get away with playing a less physical checking center as a matchup against Sedin and then have their main checker, their big center playing against Kesler on a second line. Sometimes Vancouver had to move Kesler to the wing to get him away on the Sedin line sometimes to get him away from that heavy checking. But the fact that they have Getzlaf as the number 1 and him as the number 2, and Getzlaf is a guy who's going to draw the main checking assignment from the other team, I think it gives Kesler a really good opportunity to score a lot of points next year. Just like I think Brad Richards is going to have that kind of situation in Chicago where the heat's going to be on Taves and he's going to be playing with Saad and Kane probably.
But he's Brad Richards, Mike. I mean, I agree. He
doesn't have to skate. All he has to do is dish the puck off to Patrick Kane and Brandon Saad and say, go!
I'm still looking forward to my steak dinner when Brad Richards doesn't score 50 points. I can tell you right now, I am very, very...
I'm ordering the Bloomin' onion. I'm telling you right now.
That to me that's my safest bet I've made all year. So someone in the chat room let's go. Chris said still waiting for Malkin and Ovi to bolting to join Covey in the KHL. I'm going to throw this prediction out. Kovalchuk returns to the NHL before that happens. There's no way Ovechkin or Malkin will go back to the KHL. People don't remember what leaving the KHL was like for Malkin and what the people said, what happened to his family over there. It was not a good scene. Ovechkin is way too North Americanized and couldn't wait to get on the plane back here after the Olympics. So I don't see Ovechkin wanting the pressure of being the kind of pressure he has, if you consider Washington pressure, I don't see Ovechkin going that way at all. I mean, that's so, and I have heard many times that Kovalchuk wants back in the NHL, and that's been the word. And actually, the most complicated thing about that is what to do. How do you handle that if you're the NHL? The Devils. There's no real way in the CBA to handle this. Like do the Devils have his rights still? No, or do geez, the Devils have already been penalized for circumventing the cap for this guy, right? So, but then again, you can't just retire, go back to the KHL, and become a free agent after a year. So that the NHL's not going to like that because that's players circumventing the cap. So, yeah, there's no way. There's no way those players. Remember, the KHL is not, not the most stable of leagues right now. KHL or arena football, if you're in per leagues. There's not. The KHL's got issues.
Yeah, let's just say. Right now, when one team has to be given a year hiatus from the KHL because it's the epicenter of the thing between Ukraine and Russia right now, that lends itself to the fact that the league is a little bit unstable. Now, right now, the indication is that the flow of players are going back to the NHL from the KHL. We saw a couple guys like Leo Komarov who rejoined the Leafs after going to the KHL for a year. A couple other St. Louis had a Finnish player. I think it was Laterra who joined them. If Kovalchuk, if Radulov, if Filatov, if some of these guys decide that they want to go back to the NHL, I think that's more likely than big stars going over there. There's a whole situation going on with Putin right now that I'm not going to get into the political aspects because I don't want to go down that road. But right now, the star player is not going to go to the KHL. He's going to stay in North America, and I would, if they're over there now, I think they would look for the opportunity to come here if they can.
Yeah, I like my family too much to really diss the KHL, but I will say that we'll get into. There are players that I know that went over there that still haven't gotten paid from the first lockout. And when you do get paid over there, and then if you don't get paid in the KHL, like what court are you taking that up with? I've talked to these guys and they're like, well, one of them is a very, very famous ex-Maple Leaf goalie. So there's a lot of things that this is a problem. This is a problem, and the level of play in the KHL is very good. Some of the teams, the fans are great. I get some really cool texts from fans in the KHL. Mike Keenan's team's kicking butt in the first game over there. So Madman Mike seems to be tailor-made for the KHL. So
one funny thing about the Kovalchuk situation and your prediction is we don't see this too much in hockey, but this is a classic case. You see this every now and then with NFL quarterbacks. When they retire and they say, I want to spend more time with my family, and then 6 months later, they're back looking for a job. Like, what happened?
Somebody who actually has spent more time with their family realized.
when they got tired of doing Wrangler commercials, they decide they want to come back and play for the New York Jets or the Minnesota
Vikings. Exactly, right?
Oh,
so
man.
Maybe this is a Kovalchuk. Like, when I heard him say that this decision was tied somehow to his family, I thought this guy's going to be back within 2 years, no doubt about it. So I wouldn't be surprised.
I heard that like months after he was gone, even before he played over there. So there's lots of this feels like a fight. Like then you're going to play in the KHL. Yeah, I'm going to play in the KHL. Fine, I'll play in the and then anyway. So I'll leave it there for now.
Help me!
I know. All right, next prediction on my list. I think I only have one more here. Nathan McKinnon. This is a good one though. I think. Nathan McKinnon will be a top 5 NHL scorer this season. Anyone?
I think he'll be a top 10. Top 5 is a little. Let's just say with Paul Stastny, leaving. He's going to probably get a lot more playing time at center. I mean, he played center most of the year last year, and played very well. He's going to get more ice time, more power play time. I think that the top two centers on that team, unless they decide they're going to keep O'Reilly on the line with Matt Duchene, is going to be Duchene as the number one and O'Reilly as the number two. If McKinnon, if they still think McKinnon is too raw, too green to be a top two center.
Did they watch the playoffs last year?
I know he was. I know. He was dominant. He's.
I mean, it's just this is. He reminds me. He is the closest thing we've had to Sidney Crosby, right? Since and he could be as good as Sidney Crosby eventually. Maybe better in some ways. He's faster than Sidney Crosby. I mean, there's things about him that are definitely. He's not as feisty as Crosby, but he's definitely quicker. He's got like Pavel Bure-esque speed. So I mean, this guy is just. I don't know. I'm all in on him. I think that Ryan.
He's silky smooth, absolutely. And I think he passed a huge test last year because we all know rookies, are they going to hit the wall at that 55, 60 game mark, right? How are they going to perform after that? And he just powered through it. And so we could see it happen because look at Stamkos, his second year, right? He's the last first overall pick we have where we can say that guy elevated his game to the stratosphere in his second year in the league. And so it could very well happen. We all know that he has a perfect support system there in Colorado. And it's so good, in fact, they just said to Stastny, go ahead, take the walk. No problem. We'll do it without you, right? And how many teams can do that? There aren't too many I can think of that would say to a guy of Stastny's skill, there's the door. Good luck. We'll win a cup without you, right?
And then a team that was, for the most part, leading the NHL in points last year went out and signed Stastny. I mean, think about that too. Like Stastny didn't go to a slouch of a team. He ends up on the St. Louis Blues. So I mean, that's how much depth the Colorado Avalanche have up the middle. I mean, it's kind of crazy. So yeah, Ryan O'Reilly, we've talked about before. I think he's destined for other places still, even though we've gone through this. So I don't think you can't take time away from Nathan McKinnon and give it to Ryan O'Reilly. It's just that in my mind, they're not going to do that. I don't see that happening. I don't know. To me, the top scorers in the NHL this year. Let's see what you guys think about the top 5 scorers in the NHL this year. I think Crosby, Giroux, McKinnon, Perry, and Stamkos. That's the top 5. And
I agree with Crosby. I agree with Stamkos. I agree with Giroux. I think Tyler Seguin in Dallas is going to have a very good year. Because of Spezza.
Yeah, he could sneak into the top 5 over Perry for me. Yeah, I can see that.
And far be it from me being a homer, but he's been in the top 10 the last 3 years, which shows a remarkable consistency. So I'm going to go with Phil Kessel.
Plus, if Tyler Seguin's there, you've got to go with Phil Kessel. Can't go down that road. Who do you think, Ryan? Who are your top 5?
I think obviously Crosby, Stamkos. The obvious choices. I like this again. I think Kopitar. I think Los Angeles, not to say they're going to open things up, but I think he's able to play more of a bigger role in that offense. He showed that he could be a two-way player, an elite two-way player in the playoffs last season. I can see him making a jump up. And, McKinnon could be right there. And I think Ovechkin. I think he silences some of the doubters again with another. I got to say, I'm a fan of the kid. He's
No, I mean, he's a thrilling player to watch. And he is also he's the kind of guy that's so emotional that at times that emotion plays against him. And when the team's struggling, you're going to see it on Ovechkin's face. And I think that also works against him. The media, he's not hiding things. He's not stone-faced. Like Crosby is the same way after every game. The Penguins could be winning 15 in a row or losing 15 in a row. Ovechkin's not that way. He's not. He's when the team sucks. He doesn't care if he gives up, if he goes -3 more in this game. He's going to do everything he can to win it, and he's not going to sit there and worry about his stats. So yeah, I don't see him as a top 5 scorer, but I do see him as a factor. Like I said, I like the Kopitar pick. I mean, Kopitar is a really dicey situation for the Kings right now, right? Because he's a free agent coming up, and the Kings aren't a team that has so far they've gotten everybody to buy into. Okay, we're all going to keep this thing together. I wonder if they're going to be able to do that with Kopitar or not. That's a big, to me, that's a big question mark. Kopitar, if they win another cup, with Kopitar, geez, I mean, you're thinking, well, you got to, but.
Well, he's got one more year after this year, X.
Yeah,
so
but to me that doesn't even matter. Like they can't go in. I know there's one more year, but they can't go in. Like when the second they can re-sign him, they have to.
Well, what they're going to be spending their the hopeful increase of the salary cap on is Kopitar, because they have almost everybody else locked up long term. I mean, Doughty is locked up for another 5 years. They've locked up Brown. And I'm sure it may get to the point if they have to pay Kopitar big money, which they probably will. That'll be the time that they exercise the buyout on Mike Richards.
Yeah, and it's all relative, right? It's all relative. You look at Los Angeles; they're paying huge dollars to guys who don't deserve huge dollars. I mean, Look at Richards. Look at Dustin Brown. Even for what he gives you, his price point is ridiculous. And so Kopitar. I mean, we're getting into the age where guys are going to be averaging $10 million a season, right? And I think Kopitar, you could see him being one of those guys.
Well, and I could see Justin Williams, Jared Stoller, two guys that they could cut ties with next year, and that's something. Those are two guys that Robin Regeer won't be back. I mean, there's certain players that they are making a lot of money now. When you look at their numbers, I mean, they had a long discussion about Richards this year. That was a big thing, and I heard the interview. Basically, it was like a teary-eyed Richards and Lombardi working it like, I want to stay here. I want to be a part of this. I know that I'm probably a third-line center on this team, and you're paying me $5.75 million and for a third-line center. That doesn't make sense, but I actually think Mike Richards is worth it.
The problem is it's not just Kopitar. I mean, right now, Doughty is their best defenseman, obviously, but their next two best defensemen are Alec Martinez and Jake Muzzin. Both of them are making a little more than $1 million. One is an RFA next year. The other one's a UFA next year. And the way the prices for defensemen are going, I mean, if Andy Green is making $5 million and if Nikita Nikitin's making $4.5 million,
right?
Two guys who have two Stanley Cups under their belt, they're going to be asking for $5.5, $6 million. They may not be worth it, but they're going to ask for it.
Plus, there's no getting around the fact that these guys get so much publicity when they go deep in the playoffs. Like Muzzin and Martinez are good defensemen, but are they $5 million defensemen? I mean, Muzzin has his moments where he's one of my top 5 most hated players in the NHL. It would be Jake Muzzin.
Jeez.
And I'll tell you why. Because because that I'm a Sharks fan, and I try not to be a Sharks fan. But last year, the penalties that guy drew against the Sharks. Like ridiculous dives that he took and things like that to really turn that series in some of those. You remember this, Ryan, right? I mean, this is
absolutely. Well, then, can we get into the Sharks? Could we get into
diagnosing? We have you today, Ryan. So let's talk. Let's hear it. I'm just gonna go and do some chores. Go ahead. I'm here.
I'll try.
No.
Let's cleanse our souls here, Ryan. Come on.
I'll try to keep the fire and brimstone to a minimum
here.
That's
all right.
Tell us how this team will be reshaped with the new leadership of John Scott.
And can Patrick Marleau set a record for having letters taken off of his sweater?
Exactly, right? He's up there. But look, put yourself in Doug Wilson's shoes. You are an more than adequate general manager of a National Hockey League team, right? You show up, you're able to turn that team around. They go on an unprecedented playoff run, the most points of regular season points of any team in the last decade, all this stuff, right? President's trophies.
Yeah.
You cannot win the Stanley Cup.
Right.
You can't do it. You fire Ron Wilson, right? So there's your coach gone, right? That's like your get-out-of-jail-free card. You've already played it. You're done, right?
Right.
You've used up one of your lifelines. Now your next lifeline is stripping the captaincy from Patrick Marleau, right? Yeah. Everyone agreed with that. Nobody disagreed with that decision when it was made back in the summer of 2007, 2008, whatever it was.
Yeah.
You bring in veterans, you bring in Dan Boyle, you bring in Rob Blake, you bring in guys trying to get you over the top. It doesn't work. Now, you have consistently, you cannot rely on guys like Patrick Marleau and Joe Thornton in the clutch in the playoffs. And everyone is telling you this. Right. And all of a sudden, this summer, Doug Wilson says, well, I can't fire Todd McClellan because I've pumped this guy's tires for the last 4 years, right? 5 years. This is my guy, handpicked him. He's my guy, I'm a GM. You're not allowed to do that. You can't keep firing coaches.
Right.
However, he has the faith of ownership because if you'll remember, the Sharks' ownership switched hands 2-3 seasons ago, and the incoming owners said, "Who do we have?" And Doug Wilson was basically the guy running the entire operation.
And remember, just to interrupt you for a second, Doug Wilson is phenomenal at cap management. So,
Yes.
I mean, the Sharks have always been able to pay for their players, so the owners are looking at it like, okay, continue.
Yeah, exactly. And they're making money, right? Even though they'll never admit they're making money. I mean, they're doing well. The building is selling out. The merchandise flies off the shelves, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so, Doug Wilson, as competitive as any GM in the league, he loses in miraculous fashion to the Los Angeles Kings.
Right.
And he is so upset. Even 2 weeks later, he's interviewed by the media, and he says, heads are going to roll. You know, we want players who are going to play here and not just live here, blah, blah, blah. And that's clearly directed at Marleau and Thornton, guys who, for people in the know, have said for the last 7-8 seasons, these are the guys who are responsible for your playoff failings. They will get you to the playoffs. They're phenomenal players, right? They're both. You could make an argument that both are going to be in the Hall of Fame someday, but these are the guys that let you down in the crunch time. Right. And so, to try to kickstart them, Doug Wilson is now, says to Todd McClellan, strip these guys of the numbers. Take the letters off the chest, right?
That always works.
It never fails.
It worked before. Remember Eric Lindros' C being taken off and given to Eric Desjardins? That worked really well, too. But keep going. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So Doug Wilson is out of lifelines. He has 0 lifelines left because he just gave these guys new contracts with no trade clauses at a reduced rate. He paid them much less than anyone else would have paid them if they'd hit the open market. So he's beholden to them. He cannot trade them without their consent unless he really wants to go scorched earth and threaten to bench them or send them to fire.
What kind of threat is that? They can basically go around San Francisco and San Jose spending their $5 million a year and not have to worry about playing. He's got no threat to them.
This is a beautiful part of the world to live in, and that plays into this. I mean, they get these players out there, and it's like not only are you able to just not really be noticed or recognized as much as you want to. I mean, but now you have one. But there is a difference between Marleau and Thornton, though. Obviously, I mean, there's to me like you have one player who is in Thornton who is kind of more of what he is type guy, and you just sort of have to deal. This is what Joe Thornton is. He's a perimeter player. He's a big guy, but he's great passes. He's going to score a ton of points. He does care, even though he shows up in his shorts and sandals. He does care, and he's very popular among his teammates.
Exactly.
And then everything I said is the opposite for Patrick.
Style of play, and his style of play is not conducive to playoff success.
Right, it's not.
He's a perimeter player. He thrives on time and space. He might be the best power play player of all time, right? The way he passes, the way he distributes and can see the ice. However, you're playing in a box in the playoffs. There's constant pressure. You don't have the time and space to look around and assess option 1, 2, 3. You're like a quarterback without an offensive line in the playoffs. You got to make your own plays. And he, for as much as he wants to do it, he can't do it.
Right.
It's not in his makeup, and so.
A supposed wise man once said that Joe Thornton is the greatest shinny player of all time.
Well, this is my thing with Thornton. Like, I think that Thornton is, a lot of players have 2 levels, right? They have a level that they can play at where they're very good, and then they have this other level that they find for the playoffs. Joe Thornton has an amazing 1 level, and that level is like that, and that level is better than most players in the regular season, which is why this guy puts up incredible point totals in the regular season. So his was 1 level, but in his 2nd level, although he,
However,
go ahead.
We have seen the 2nd level. Because, if you recall, when he was traded from Boston, there was a lot of angst. There was a lot of, this guy's a bum, he's out of here. And what does he do when he shows up in San Jose? Well, just destroys the league and wins the Art Ross Trophy and the Hart Trophy, right?
Yeah.
The only season he's done it.
Oh, yeah.
So when he's motivated, he can do it. Also, when Ron Wilson gets fired from San Jose, what are Ron Wilson's parting words? He says, I think history will show it wasn't so much my coaching as the players I had on my team. Yeah. Now, what happens when Toronto Ron Wilson is hired by Toronto. Toronto goes and plays.
There's nothing better. Let me stop for 1 second. There's nothing better than hiring a coach who has just said something like that. I mean, that to me is the epitome of the worst thing a coach could possibly say on his way out the door. But
no, because Ron Wilson did that every press conference. He threw more people under the bus than people got killed on the Gardiner Expressway in Toronto. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, no, I know, but how? Anyway, continue, Ryan.
But case in point, go back and look at the box score. This is legit. I make up a lot of stuff, but I'm not making this up.
No, I believe you. I remember because we talked about it at the time.
Ron Wilson's first game in San Jose, Joe Thornton, motivated against a former coach that threw him under the bus, scores 4 points in the first period in that game against Toronto.
Right.
Which shows you what this guy can do when he is motivated. Now, Doug Wilson thinks I stripped the captaincy off this guy, and that will motivate him. It will not motivate him.
No.
He will go into a shell. He will not pout, but he will. You're creating a battle against your best player that you're not going to win. It's not winnable.
Plus, think about Pavelski for a second, okay, and what Pavelski's all about. And he is he's a great guy, great person, really driven, amazing player, incredibly talented. The last person in the world who would want to take the C from Joe Thornton. Like he's like that to him. That's the problem with this. Like you take away the cat. No one on that team wants to, it's different than taking it from Marleau. Marleau's way more distant from his teammates. Thornton is not that way. So it's like that to me is like that's where the lose is. Like Pavelski's like, yeah, I got the C. Sure.
And if they threaten to bench him, Ryan, what's gonna 5 minutes after they say you're not playing tonight, Thornton's on the phone with his wife saying, book the weekend trip to Napa.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
That's it. We're done.
Let's go for some grapes.
No, I think these are great. I mean, and this is so. So where does this go, Ryan? I mean, what do you think the outcome is this year?
San Jose.
Mm-hmm.
While there won't be as much emphasis on regular season success as there has been, because everyone knows that if you're a team that's going to make the playoffs, it doesn't matter where you finish, right? Especially in the Western Conference. But this team is definitely running the risk of not making the playoffs this year with all this upheaval, with all these different personalities. And you also look at the on-ice product. The fact is, as good as Marleau and Thornton are, they're another year gone.
Yeah.
Dan Boyle is now gone. That's a shaky defense at best where you're relying on good young players like Justin Braun and Jason Demers. But the fact of the matter is, it's kind of a wonky situation. The defense is not proven. Marc-Edouard Vlasic is amazing. We saw what he did at the Olympics. The guy is incredible. However, you're pretty thin. And again, the same problem you've had in San Jose for a long time. Fantastic at the top, but thin on your depth lines. And that's where you win playoff series, is where you're your third and fourth lines and the guys that can grind and battle and get you some production. And the Sharks, again, they just don't have that either. So the makeup is wrong.
And I think the biggest miscalculation, I liked Brent Burns at forward. I think moving Brent Burns back to defense to replace Boyle is going to A, leave a gap at forward, and B, when he played on defense with Minnesota and earlier in his tenure in San Jose, he's not a defensive defenseman. He's more of an offensive guy, and I just don't think that that's a move conducive to what the Sharks are trying to do this year. They should have gone out. They should have made a trade. They should have either traded Thornton or Marleau to get a guy. There were rumors that we reported about Phaneuf. That would have made a lot more sense than moving Brent Burns and keeping the status quo at forward. And
that's the thing about the C thing a little bit more, Mike, is that they're either taking the C away to try to make some kind of weird point to like in like okay that these guys are they don't they're gonna say they don't need a C on their shirt, but they're gonna make this strange point. Okay, this is Pavelski and Couture's team or whatever. Or they're taking the C's off to piss them off and get them to accept a trade. So it's like one or the other. To me, we don't know. I do know they tried. They tried to move these guys.
Or option 3, they stripped the C just to give it back to Thornton in training camp.
Right, and I could see that happening too.
They see it's still my team. while he won't say that, it's kind of the unspoken thing in the room. The guy's the biggest presence, the biggest personality. He runs everything. He runs practices. He does his captain's practices during the off season. So it's a way to say, hey, no hard feelings, big guy. You're still our captain. We're all behind you.
I wouldn't be surprised if Pavelski said that. Like if Pavelski or Couture came out, or even Vlasic came out and said, listen, we are not going to take the captaincy. Joe Thornton's the captain of this team. Like that, I could see something like that. That would be better than Pavelski taking the captaincy. It would be better for the team. But Marleau is another ball of wax. So
the logic that stripping let's talk about Marleau. The logic of stripping the A or the C off of Marleau or Thornton, and they're gonna say, oh yeah, I want to be traded from San Jose to Ottawa. Not a chance.
No.
If it's going to Pittsburgh, which we've heard that rumor around, and there's a chance to play with Sidney Crosby, okay. But if they want to send him to Ottawa or Winnipeg, not a chance in hell. They're staying in San Jose.
But again, Mike, also this comes down to a classic situation where you have players who are past their prime, who are 34, 35 years old. We saw it in Calgary with Jarome Iginla. They exceeded his best buy date, and they should have traded him 3 years earlier if they were going to trade him. It should have been an off-season trade where they get the sun, moon, and the stars for the guy, rather than a deadline acquisition where you rip the soul out of your team for peanuts, right? For pennies on the dollar.
Right.
So the Sharks, if they really want to go in this new direction, I mean, either Doug Wilson should have mapped it out earlier and said, I'm trading these guys before I sign them to extensions with no trade clauses, right?
Right.
But he was kind of banking on, well, we're going to win the Stanley Cup and everything's going to be fine, right?
Well, here's the thing, right? I mean, yeah, you're right, because this is the issue, and I've been working on a blog for a while about how the Bruins handled their being caught by the Flyers when they were up 3-0, and how the Sharks have handled their being caught by the Kings. And so it's a vastly different story. So the Bruins, I mean, both these teams, Bruins and the Sharks, are great teams. The Flyers caught the Bruins, and the next year the Bruins won the Stanley Cup, right? So the Sharks, to me, the way it was handled when it first happened was the worst mistake that Doug Wilson has ever made. Like the way he should have been like the Bruins were, which was, man, we really blew that. That stinks. We're a good team though. We were one of the top teams in the league. We're motivated. We're going to come back now. Our team's learned how to lose, and then we're going to know how to win. And we're going to come back with really a chip on our shoulder. And that's what the Bruins did. And the Bruins came out the next year and were just phenomenal and blew everybody out of the water. Tim Thomas had his record season. Everything went right for them. But the Sharks, they came out and they held a press conference. Major changes are happening. Brent Burns is going to play defense, and Brent Burns is nothing like Boyle. They're not the same kind of player at all. So it's not a replacement for Boyle.
Well, no. Okay, I'll just say this quickly.
Yeah.
Two teams came out at the end of the season and promised, quote, culture change, unquote.
Yeah.
Toronto and San Jose. At least Toronto gutted their forwards, their bottom six forwards, gutted their coaching staff, added an analytics department, and gutted their management staff. What did San Jose do? John Ferguson Jr. went to Boston, and they added John Scott, and they let go
Drew Remenda.
And they fired Drew Remenda, and they let go Dan Boyle. That says culture change to me, folks. Wow.
And Rafi Torres had off-season surgery.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the whole thing is this: they
planned the parade route in San Jose. Give me the path there, Ryan. Come on.
The Sharks, though, I mean, Mike, that's what I mean. Like to me, they didn't necessarily do the wrong thing.
They did nothing. That's the point.
But honestly,
you don't promise culture change and do nothing.
You don't have to promise culture change. You killed the Stanley Cup champion LA Kings in 3 games.
Well,
you are not a sucky team. You lost to a team that is incredibly good. I mean, the Kings have shown what they can do in the playoffs. They're a tough team in the playoffs, right? So you didn't go out in an embarrass. I mean, as much as the 3-0 loss is horrendous, it's not the end of the world. They played it like it was the end of the world, and I know it has to do with all the other years that came before it and all that stuff. But you still have to. I mean, so what they actually did was they brought back a pretty good team. The question is, can, is there any continuity here? Do that team, which thought everything was changing, and now, and the coach and the assistant, the captains are changing. So I mean, it's like, okay, but at the end of the day, I mean, this is a really good team.
Well,
So
I'll buy your premise that maybe what they should have done is say, okay, we're going to stay the course. We think this team is good enough, and we'll just go with what we have. I don't think the fan base would have taken that. I think the fan base, obviously was peed off that they lost a 3-0 lead to LA and lost in 7 games. That being said, you go out and you promise changes, you better bring out and bring forth changes. So Doug Wilson should have either shut his mouth and said nothing, or if he was going to do what he did and go out and promise changes, then it's incumbent on him to make the changes. And I think the fire is all going to be on him and on Todd McClellan next year if they fall flat in their face, not the players.
Or at least, like I said, you've already used your lifeline. You fired Ron Wilson. You could still fire Todd McClellan. Like, there's nothing saying you can't do that. And I think at least the fan base would have said, okay, at least now we have a scapegoat who isn't Joe Thornton or Patrick Marleau. So it would have been better. Doing anything would have been better than doing nothing, right? And it goes back to the same way.
Yeah.
You're right. This is just years upon years of angst and years of just, geez, why can't we do it? Why can't we do it in the playoffs? And so it's the best situation to be in and the worst situation to be in, because you do have 25 other teams who would say, we would love to trade places with you, but the purpose is winning the Stanley Cup. It's not getting to the second round. It's not getting to the Western Conference. This is a team, one of only a handful of teams, that has never made the Stanley Cup final. And when you consider all the success they've had, that's a huge black mark on the organization, the fact they've never been able to get over the hump.
But last year was the real first year for the Pavelski Couture team. Like, to my that we don't know what that team is in the playoffs. That, to me, taking that aside, to me Pavelski's could be a really good player. It has shown to be a very good playoff performer. I mean, last year, obviously things fell apart. So, I mean,
and I don't want to lay all the blame on Thornton either, because both Couture and Pavelski were horrible those last 4 games.
Yeah,
they were completely ineffective. And whether that was a case of, hey, either these guys aren't clutch, or it was just the Kings saying, okay, we're going to start playing now. When you're playing against your older brother, and he lets you win for a couple points, and then he just dominates you.
That's exactly what it was. And the Kings got totally inside their head. And at some point, it was even in the game that they won, the Sharks game, the 3rd game they won, the Kings got in their head. Remember that game went down? Like, the Kings came back, and it went overtime, and it was like, it was in that game, to me, that the series was lost, the game, even though they won the game, because then that was where, and this is where I think you can lay the blame on McClellan, because the coach has to be the one who stops that. He has to say, listen, these guys are not better than us. There's nothing spectacular about them. I don't know. We can beat them. They've won a Stanley Cup, but we've shown we can dominate them if we want to. Yeah. So, I mean, that's where, and I know, like, one of my friends who's a Kings fan, we had Matt Barry on the air a while ago, and he said the best thing about the summer was that McClellan was still the San Jose Sharks coach. So that to him was the best thing for the Kings this summer. So,
and this is a guy who cast a movie with Kate Upton, so you know that
he knows what he's doing. No. Absolutely. That's all the time we have, but this is really fun. Ryan, we got to get you as like a regular weekly guest or something.
Hey, sounds good. I'm up for it. I'm just here chilling, So
let's do it. That'd be phenomenal. Hang on after we stop the show, because I want to talk to you. Guys, we'll be back on Monday, and next week we're getting 1 week closer to camps. Next Wednesday, actually, I'm going to be going to the Flyers Capitals rookie game, so that's kind of exciting. I'm actually going to see hockey. You're going to see hockey. Is it next week, Mike?
Next weekend is the rookie tournament in beautiful London, Ontario, and I'll be seeing the Maple Leafs, Penguins, Blackhawks, and Senators rookies play a series of games.
Nice, excellent. So we're getting there, guys. We're getting there. Thanks for sticking with us. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. Talk to you soon.